Right, let's go live now to Hamburg in Germany, where our reporter Mzwandile Mbeje is currently standing by to give us a full update of what has taken place today. Very good morning to Mzwandile. I do understand there are still pockets of protesters right outside the G20 venue. Give us a bit of an update on that. We heard that police have been working through the night to try and quell those protesters.
Thank you very much, Alicia. Indeed, last night we saw again the running battles between the police and the anti-capitalist protesters. Destruction of property, looting, fighting with the police, all those things really characterized that protest that happened last night. But other than the protest, Alicia, the negotiations here continue. As I'm speaking to you now, the session that is underway is a session that looks at an issue of a partnership with Africa and migration. This is a very important issue, particularly for us as the African continent, because here Angela Merkel put on the table very key issues that relate to the African continent. People were scared that with Donald Trump basically saying America first, issues about Africa will be relegated. But I think it's heartening to see leaders of the world getting together, speaking specifically about Africa, Alicia. But I can just, perhaps before we continue with this discussion between you and I, just want to get a take from my colleague here, Mbeje, who actually has been following and covering this event, to find out what is his sense, what does he think will happen. Mr. Mbeje, you've been here for about 2 or 3 days now. So what's your impression of the whole event?
Well, the impression that I'm getting is that, in fact, world leaders are committed to find the solutions that are affecting not just developed countries, but even developing countries, especially those in Africa. If you look, for instance, at the issue of migration, that on its own, it has been putting a huge impact on the budget, especially of this country, Germany, whereby it is estimated that by 2020, Germany would have spent around $120 billion just on accommodating people from countries like Libya, people who are using the Mediterranean into Europe. And of course, again, if you look at the issue of climate change, that really affects most countries, especially in the African continent. There has been an extensive deliberations on that. And indeed, countries are seeming to be finding each other, especially if you look at when we started this summit, some people are very concerned about the issue of protectionism, whereby they're saying that the United States in particular would be sort of adopting an inward-looking approach. But that has been minimized, whereby when we saw President Donald Trump really sort of coming to the party, and indeed deliberations are seeming to be panning out very good.
So do you think on the final text there will be unanimity?
Well, we sincerely hope that at an ultimate and really not watered down communique would be released. At the end of the day, we are told that around 3 o'clock this afternoon, a joint statement would be released by leaders of the industrialized nations.
Thank you very much. Alicia, as I said to you, my colleague Mbeje giving his take because covering this event, which is a very important event, Alicia. And I said to you, right now they are discussing the issue of partnership with Africa, and then we are waiting later on to see what the final text will say, the posture of America.
All right, so Mzwandile, maybe tell us, we do understand that President Jacob Zuma has tabled his speech at the conference. What did he actually say? We know that he did mention that South Africa or Africa wants to strongly strengthen relations with China.
Not only China, Alicia, I think you are talking perhaps about the BRICS meeting of leaders that happened on the sidelines. Remember that South Africa will be the next chair of BRICS after China, because this year China is going to take over the reins, and then next year South Africa will then take over. Obviously, the president made it clear that as South Africa, he's very willing to work with China, and China is one of the biggest investors on our African continent. But what is happening now, Alicia, is that he's having that opportunity to speak to 20 leaders or more about the issues that affect the African continent. In this regard, we're talking about the issues of migration. You know, so many people have been killed trying to cross to Europe because they are seeking better opportunities. So these are the opportunities that he's having right now. And of course, the issue of investment onto the African continent. So this session is underway, Alicia, as we speak.
Mzwandile, tell us more about the nuclear and as well as the climate discussions. We do understand that there was some sort of agreement that was signed when it comes to the use of nuclear. What can you tell us broadly about that?
I wouldn't say anything about nuclear because there's nothing that is specific in terms of this G20 on nuclear. But the issues that are really high on the agenda is the climate change. The climate change deal, you remember the one that was signed in Paris, but with the US walking out, it really raised a lot of fears from many quarters. That's why they are trying to find each other. And then the issue of migration. You know, there have been a number of refugees coming into Europe, and then some Europeans have really not been welcoming, despite the fact that a country, for example, like Germany, has been opening its borders, but there's pressure from other countries to say, well, maybe they would need to find a strategy to deal with these issues. And of course, and the issue of growth. You remember that G20 is primarily about dealing with economic matters that affect the world. So what strategies do they need to do? And you know that currently the world is in a much better place than it was, for example, last year, because there are signs that the recovery is happening. So how do they keep the momentum? So those are the issues that are really dominating today, Alicia.
All right, and just to wrap up, Mzwandile, any new agreements that we could possibly look forward to, and also what can we expect on the day today, as we know this is the final day of the summit?
We expect, we've been trying to check some of the draft texts and some people perhaps who may be in the know of what is happening. We do gather that on trade, I think they are broadly agreeing that, you know what, there has to be free trade. Despite the fact that perhaps America and other countries are adopting some protectionist postures. But I think broadly they agreed that so there needs to be free trade for everyone. So there we expect a text that perhaps will be agreed to by everyone. And then on migration, we also expect some sort of agreement. Climate change, I think that's where we may really have a difficulty, given that the most powerful country in the world has pulled out. So we expect at around 3, Alicia, to hear the communique, which will then lay to rest all the suspicion that we are talking about. So will they have agreed? What is it that they would have disagreed on? All
right, we'll await with bated breath for those final deliberations. That is our acting political editor, Mzwandile Mbeje, joining us all the way from Hamburg in Germany. Let's have a look now.